From working as a math tutor, I've seen that so many students struggle with negatives. So let's talk about it.
In our first example, we see 4 plus negative 3. Adding a negative number is the same as subtracting. So we can rewrite this as 4 minus 3. We know that's going to be 1. In the next example, we have 4 minus 6. 4 plus negative 6, we can rewrite it this way. And let's look up here at our number line. If we're starting at 4, we're going backwards 6. We know we're going that way because we see negative numbers over here, and 6 is a negative number. We're taking it away. So our answer should be getting smaller, not bigger. And we end up at negative 2. Now note, the difference between 4 and 6 is 2. If we did 6 minus 4, that gives us 2. The difference between these numbers is 2. In this case, we're writing negative 2 because 6 is a negative number and it's the bigger of the two numbers. So our answer is negative. In the previous example, 4 is the bigger number and 4 is positive, so our answer is positive. In this next example, we have negative 1 plus 2. So we're starting at negative 1 and we're going forward 2, to the right 2. So we end up at 1. And lastly, we have negative 1 minus 2. Again, when we're adding a negative, that's the same as just subtracting. So negative 1, and we go backwards 2, we end up at negative 3. Here, we'll notice that both numbers are negative, so we get an even smaller number, or an even more negative number, because technically these numbers way over here are smaller than, say, 0 even. And in the previous example, 2 is the bigger number. It's positive and our answer is positive. So that's a good way to check whether your answer is correct or not when you're adding and subtracting. Let's look at multiplication, which is slightly different. Here we have 2 times negative 2. We have one negative sign, so our answer is going to be negative. It's going to be negative, and then you just multiply the numbers. 2 times 2 is 4. So it's going to be negative 4. In this next example, we have negative 1 times negative 3, 2 negatives. And 2 negatives make a positive. And then you just multiply the numbers. 1 times 3 is 3. In the next example, we have a fraction. So when you multiply fractions, you need to multiply the numerators together and the denominators together. So we can rewrite negative 3 as negative 3 over 1, because anything divided by 1 is itself, so it's not changing the question. And then we just do 3 times negative 3, which of course is negative 9, because it stays negative because there's only one negative sign. And then 2 times 1 is, of course, 2. Negative 9 over 2. And we can't reduce that, so that's our final answer. Now let's look to subtraction. Here we have 3 minus 8. So we're starting at 3 and we're going backwards 8 in the negative or the left direction. One way we can think of it is to get to 0, we need to go how many backwards? Well, we need to go negative 3, backwards 3. But our goal wasn't to subtract 3, our goal was to subtract 8. So how many more do we need to go over? 5. We need to subtract 5 more so that we get we've gone negative 8. So our answer is going to be negative 5. You could also think of this as what's the difference between 8 and 3, right? So 8 minus 3 gives us the difference of 5. And should our sign be positive or negative? Well, it should be negative because 8 is the bigger number and 8 is negative. Okay, for the next one, we have 3 minus negative 1. Well, we just saw with the multiplication that when you have two negatives multiplied together, they become a positive. You could think of this as, one negative times another negative makes the two pieces of the cross, right? So we have 3 plus 1, which of course is 4. Next, we have negative 4 minus 2. So we're starting at negative 4. And we're taking away 2. So that means we're going to the left 2. So we end up at negative 6. Okay, our final subtraction, we have negative 4 minus negative 2. Here, the two negatives cancel out, they become a positive. So we have -4 plus 2. Let's look back at our number line. We have -4 and we're going to the right because to the right we see all the positive numbers. So we get -2. Out of these two answers, or these two numbers, -4 and 2, -4 is the bigger number. It's negative, so our answer is negative. That's a quick way to check whether your answer makes sense when you're adding or subtracting. Now let's look to division, which is very similar to multiplication. Here we have -2, or 2 divided by -2. So here we have one negative sign, so our answer stays negative. We have negative, well, 2 divided by 2 is just 1. Next, we have -3 divided by -3. Well, the two negatives cancel out, just like with the multiplication, and our answer is going to be positive. 3 divided by 3 is just 1. You can also think of division as a fraction, right? The two negatives cancel out, and the 3's, well, 3 over 3 is just a whole, so we're left with 1. Positive 1. And lastly, we have -6 divided by 2. One negative sign means our answer stays negative, and 6 divided by 2 is 3. We could also think of this as a fraction and reduce it. So to summarize, the main difference when you're between adding and subtracting on this side and multiplying and dividing on the opposite side is when you subtract two negatives, so let's say -1 minus 1, our answer becomes -2. More negative. Whereas when you multiply or divide by two negatives, so let's say we had -1 times -1, our answer becomes, well, the two negatives cancel out, and our answer becomes positive. That's the main difference, and I think that's what students often get mixed up on.
Thanks for watching. I hope it was helpful.